Hey, I want to welcome you guys to the LINC Talks Podcast today, and I am really excited about the team that we have here today to bring some thoughts and ideas. We've got Pastor Dar Blanshan, his son Curt, and daughter-in-law Taryn, and this is going to be a great conversation. We're going to talk about how to pass the leadership baton. We're going to talk about it a little bit on you guys' level, but you know, in every situation, you want to see God pushing you up, taking you to the next level. And during that transition of going to the next level, you're going to be receiving a baton, but you're also going to be giving a baton. And so we want to talk about that a little bit. But to begin our conversation, Dar, tell us a little bit about Victory Church. You planted that church years ago. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Victory was planted 20 years ago. We just celebrated 20 years in September, and started as a Bible study there in Mount Pleasant, and 46 people at the first service, and then it went through the years, and just been a ride, been an adventure. We have a Christian daycare as well within the church. There's about 45 employees running around there now, so it's just it's been quite a ride.
You started with 45, now you got 45 employees.
Yeah, there you go.
Good. So things are growing, things are developing. Yeah. You guys have been, I've watched you over the years. It's just been amazing. I just want to honor you for the leadership that you've brought to that community and to the church, and the impact that you guys are making. So you got right here to your right is your son, Curt. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about how...
Careful.
How much time
how honest do you want to be?
Well, we're going to be transparent.
All right.
But tell us a little bit about how you watch your son grow and develop, and what did that look like in your eyes as you watched him over the years?
This is loaded.
That's a lot to capture. I saw, a call on his life from a young man. The first church that we had planted, I watched him come up through children's church, being the puppeteer, and doing the puppets, and then watched him, be the right-hand man of the youth pastor there at Resurrection Life that we were at. And then himself stepping into a youth pastor position for 12 years, I believe is what it was.
I think it was 15 or 16.
15 or 16, okay. And
time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, but I knew a long time ago that, the call was on his life, the mantle was there, and just developed, and him and Pastor Taryn are doing a great job of leading the church now.
Awesome.
So
Curt, tell us a little bit about when you've sensed the call of God in your life. When did, how did that emerge inside of you?
Oh, that's
a good question.
I was a young man of 5 years. I remember the puppet team talking about that, and just feeling like there was something that I wanted to contribute to the church and to helping others grow. And I helped out quite a bit in children's ministry for a long time. And then when that season was done, it was a good step into youth ministry and serving underneath some amazing leaders in that church, and just growing in that season. Is just, from a young age, I knew that I was called to kingdom work. Yeah. It's always been a part of my life, and had some great examples to look up to. It was just, that was a natural part of our life growing up, was just our parents served. So that was the expectation in our home, was we're going to be a part of the church.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Taryn, when did you come along?
Pastor Curt and I have been together for, almost 20 years? 19 years total.
Yeah.
And we'll be married for 16 years this August, which is awesome. I was raised in the church. We met at a youth group. And I was 16 going on 17, but I potentially told him I was 17.
She started a relationship with a lie.
I was 1 month out. I was close enough. The rest has been history. And I had always envisioned being in full-time ministry, but really didn't know how that would come to be. Yeah. Because I worked full-time from the time we got married all the way through, well, it's been 5 years now. I think I celebrate 5 years of being on full-time, in full-time ministry with you, being at the church. So yeah, it's been exciting.
Did it scare you to marry the pastor's son?
No, my parents were elated. They were like, finally a pastor's kid.
Well, your parents were heavily involved in ministry.
Yeah, I grew up in the church. My parents, I mean, same dynamic in the sense of servanthood and, putting a huge emphasis on church. And it was, your life is built around church, not the other way around.
Yeah.
And so I had kind of learned that servanthood, gratitude, worship ministry, being at the church early and late, tent meetings, the whole thing, my whole life.
I'm kind of hearing a theme here for some of you that may be looking at stepping into ministry or fulfilling the vocational call of ministry in your life, and that is there's a seedbed called servanthood. Serving allows people to see the ministry gift on your life and allows you to be in a position to see the platform and enlarged in your life and the opportunities come your way. So I just want to encourage you, if you're looking to jump into ministry, jump in and serve right where you're at. Be faithful with what God's put in your hands and do it with all your might, right?
With the unseen. Too many people are going for the platform ministry right away. And so you don't get that chance to build that steady foundation that's grown behind the scenes to where you're able to submit to leadership and grow in that season.
Yeah.
So no, it's
okay.
It's a good
Let's
place to
talk
start.
about that for just a minute and looking at the aspect of, being in the unseen, allowing that to position you to receive, maybe a public platform. How did that work itself in your life, Curt?
Well, so much of my time in ministry was in the unseen. I worked in children's ministry for a long time, behind a puppet stage for a while. And then as I got older and working in youth ministry, a lot of the stuff I did was tech work behind the scenes. But it allowed me a season where I could grow in leadership to where I was put in charge of teams, I was put in charge of people, and just allowing me to grow a solid foundation in that regard that I was going to lean on heavily later on. But it also develops a heart to where in ministry, our heart should not be about getting up front and being seen for what we're doing, because it's more about us instead of the kingdom at that point. And that will show itself in the long term every single time.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're seeing a lot in culture right now.
Yeah. We see a lot of projected, well, if you have platform, that's what you should be chasing. And I think in that, you're no longer chasing the kingdom because it's rooted in self often.
Yeah. So Curt, Dar, talk to us a little bit about as you guys have led the church for years and years and years, and now you're sensing maybe a transition in your own life. Tell us how that transition to step into the season that you're in right now, how did that kind of, how did God spark that in your heart to move to a different season?
Yeah. It's never easy to change. Nobody wants to change. But we had talked a long time ago about this transition and at the point that it would come. And I don't know that as a lead pastor, you're ever ready.
Yeah.
But you got to follow God in the whole thing, you know, and be obedient to what He's showing you to do.
Yeah.
And in our particular case, we had a designated season, and it might have even lingered a little bit because COVID happened.
Yeah.
And, it was all hands on deck at that time. And so it might have been 2-3 years behind, actually, when we thought it was going to happen. Yeah. But it all came together. And but I will say this for any senior leader or lead pastor, that it's not an easy thing to do. And I don't believe there's many things that God calls us to do that are easy. Yeah. I don't see the word easy in the Bible much. Yeah. But knowing in my heart. And then there's two things that the Lord kept bringing back to me. And there were two words through the last 4 years, if you will. And one was humility, and the other one was perspective. and the perspective of trying to put myself in the shoes of the person and the people that are taking over as well. And we began probably 3 to 5 years ago staffing, when we would bring a new staff member on, staffing for their personalities instead of mine. Wow. Staffing for their future needs and people that we knew would work well with them rather than working well with me. Yeah. And so by the time we got to the transition, the staff had kind of gelled around this whole concept, and it's been beautiful just seeing the support. Yeah. That
I want to drill down with some of the details in just a minute, but I want to hone in on that struggle.
Oh,
because
I don't.
I know. But, you know, as I'm working with lead pastors throughout the LINC network and other relationships that I have, I find that to be one of the biggest struggles is to come to the place of willingness to pass the baton, especially for someone that has been the pioneer of the work. Someone that, you know, you birthed it. This is your baby. And now you're looking at not only handing it off, but then you're looking at what's the future for me. Yeah. I think part of the struggle, and I'm speaking from an outside perspective, not someone that's lived it like yourself, but it seems to me like one of the biggest struggles is what's my identity? There's an identity shift that has to take place. Yeah. Can you talk to maybe some of our lead guys? And this would apply even if you're in a department. If you make that department leadership your identity, it's going to be hard to hand off the baton. So this applies across the board, not just for senior pastors, but anybody that's in leadership that God is going to move to a different opportunity or a different season of life. So, but talk to us.
Yeah, well, it's huge. Identity, every one of us know how to teach, keeping our identity in Christ and not in our position. We all teach it really well. Yeah. But when it comes to a time when that identity is changing, I just be honest with you, there were points of depression. There were points where I felt like I was giving up on ministry, but I knew I wasn't. I knew I was following what God had laid out. I knew this was the healthiest thing for the body of people that we were leading. Yeah. I knew it in my heart, but it still didn't make it easy. And it was a day at a time. And I tried to be transparent as well with Pastor Curt and Taryn on that way through. And, Pastor Curt felt like he could relate from when he stepped down from being a youth pastor. He could relate in the same thing. But it just wasn't easy. It was a day at a time situation. You got to know in your heart that this is what God wants me to do. Yeah. And just because we're in the will of God, I taught this a few weeks ago, just because you know you're in the middle of the will of God doesn't mean it's going to be easy. And I think so many people, they want it to be easy, and it just isn't.
Can you start back at just because it's the will of God?
Pardon?
Can you start back at just because it's the will of God?
Okay.
Because he interrupted the will of God. We're going to have to edit that part.
There's a blooper track, right?
Yeah,
so
it's okay. I've been wanting to clear my throat for a while.
So just because you think it's the will of God, start right there.
Yeah, a lot of people think just because it's the will of God, it's going to be easy, and it's not. Yeah. And I really have a peace now. I feel like, and I was sharing it with Pastor Curt and Pastor Taryn a few weeks ago, that I feel like I made it through that season, but it probably lasted about a year for me. Yeah. Before the transition and a short time after. Once we got through the transition, and I I just saw Pastor Curt and Pastor Taryn's gifts shining. I saw the way that people were responding. And I realized there's been failed transitions in history, but this one wasn't. And it felt good, it looked good, and it's going good. You know, the year-over-year attendance is up 15%. There's just momentum. You can sense it in the church. Yeah. And it's not the old guy was done, okay? Yeah. It's just it was time for a transition in leadership. And you're going to dig into some of the other detailed stuff later. Yeah. But I guess, don't fear that struggle.
Yeah. I think what we don't realize is there's a part of our humanity that has to process this.
Yeah.
And part of our humanity is emotional, it's mental, it's spiritual, and there's a process that has to take place on the inside of us in order for us to move forward with that.
Right. If I can just piggyback off of that as well, as important as it is for the lead that's handing off to recognize that season, it's just as important for the person who's receiving to allow space for that season. Yeah. I think that there can be a lot of damage that's done in a unhealthy handoff in a church when the person who is chomping at the bit, ready to be put in the game, when they're pushing up against it, and it's just your position should be just waiting with open hands so that when they are ready to let go, that it's a healthy handoff in that position. Yeah. Just I think some people can get ahead of themselves and make it unhealthy. And if you love the leader that you're taking over from, then you need to create that space for them.
And we love him.
I think of a relay race. If you've ever run in a relay, you mark off a spot and when the runner before you gets to that spot, that's when you take off so that you can receive the baton before the line that disqualifies you. Right. Okay. And so there's that between those two lines, there's a lot of important stuff that happens. If you leave too early, then you're going to be past the disqualifying line before you get the baton. Right. So I think about that, in your analogy there. Both of you, just talk a little bit about how you guys, as a family and as a ministry, as a team, how did the communication is so important in this process. Talk to us a little bit about the communication points.
Wow, that's pretty.
You want to talk about only the good ones?
Let's talk about only the good ones. Yeah, let's talk about the good conversations there. No, it's a priority on vulnerability. I know there's going to be some personalities that are a little bit more prone to that. I think I have that personality to where I'm just a little bit more open on things. But just being willing to be open about things. I remember sitting down a few years ago and I was just talking to him and I just talking about my frustrations coming into it because I understand his frustrations and some of the things that he's dealing with, but there was frustrations from my side on the receiving end because, like I said, I was ready to be put in the game. And so talking with him and just being honest with it, because I could have internalized it and just held on to it, but I think that would have destroyed more of the health of the handoff than anything. So I just remember having an honest conversation and just being like, I feel like I'm in a holding pattern. I feel like it's going on too long. So it was amazing working with him because just humility throughout the entire process and just being like, okay, then what do we do to fix that? And so that was always the heart and the goal for everything that we've had with our communication because we made a choice right from the start that our relationship was going to take priority over everything. That was what we were going to safeguard and everything else was going to follow off of that. So I really appreciated that he created a space to where I could have that honest conversation and just truthfully talk about things.
Yeah.
And there were plenty of things that tried to mess that relationship up.
Yeah. I'm sure the enemy attacked that. Let me shift gears a little bit here in the sense that, in the process of communication, there was a transition really not only of leadership in you guys' situation, but leadership style. in the sense that, pretty much Dar.
Yeah, my jokes are a lot funnier than
They are.
Yeah.
I'm still trying. I'll get there eventually. But that was something I did not get in the genetics there.
But in one sense, Dar, you led as a lead pastor, but you guys have processed in a way that you co-lead. Talk about a little bit of how did that get communicated, maybe not just between you guys, but to the congregation, and how's that transition been?
Well, he always saw the only way it was going to work was if she was with me. He didn't think that I could do it alone. No, that going back to when we first met, that was God told me she was the one. And that's what I've told a lot of young people over the years is you don't marry for love. You marry who God tells you to marry. And there were so many qualities in her that I can't even imagine doing what I'm doing in ministry without those qualities. It's just, you completely.
You complete me. You're my lobster.
You're my lobster. She fills in the blanks. And what was awesome is over the years, my parents got to see that. They got to see her grow in leadership and her stepping in different positions at the church. So when we had that conversation, I could be speaking on turn, it was a confirmation of what they've already been seeing. So there was just a lot of peace there. And just, as we were coming closer to the handoff date, just she was stepping up into more and more of the leadership, and that was what we wanted to be seen as just as more and more of the leadership responsibility of the church was being put onto our plates as he was releasing things slowly over the years. She was a part of that process. So when we stepped up together on the stage and let the church know this is what we're going to do going forward, it made sense because they'd already been seeing it in practice.
Right. Yeah, I feel like there was very little that I wasn't involved in. But that was good. That was kind of key. But then also, co-leadership is so unique. I think it's a very unique thing to experience, but then also to lead your church in. But there's still a submission. Yeah. He is the head of this ministry.
That's right.
And we do marriage stuff.
We're not on marriage here.
Oh, sorry.
Marriage counseling comes later.
Okay.
I submit to his leadership, but there is still this co-dynamic of we make decisions together.
Yes.
Or if, we don't do things out of agreement, I would say we spend more time on those things. Right. If we are in disagreement about something, it's like maybe we need more time to talk about it, think about it. Yep, I mean, most of our days, evenings, weekends, life is spent discussing, dreaming, bringing our children in. I mean, we aren't just in it on a Sunday.
Right.
It's not like a coat we put on for the weekend.
Yeah.
We have submitted our entire life to ministry and his kingdom and what God wants for our lives and our people.
Yeah.
And it's been great.
So let's go back to laying the foundation for this transition. Dar, talk to us about what do you think was maybe one or two of the key elements that you guys did in laying the foundation that made it successful?
Relationships, obviously. And that staffing point that I already brought up, I think, was huge.
That set me up for so much success right there.
Right,
Okay.
because they were people. Go ahead.
So basically you're talking about like in the early part of the transition, you began to layer in, if there was a staffing change, then the staffing hire was not hired under your visions as much and your leadership style as much it was Curt and Taryn's leadership style.
Correct. Knowing that they would fit into the team. I mean, you always want them to fit in the team, but my style of leadership was different. You've already stated that, and I want to say this, that I've already stated it's not easy, but the fact that some people aren't going to like it and some people are going to leave, it's just part of change and part of growth. And, working through that with all the grace and all the mercy that you can. And it's not that the people are bad or anything else. It's just transition and change. People have challenges with it. Allowing time for that, I think really over a 5-year period, there was a real changing up.
Yeah.
I'd like to say that you can control that, but you really just got to trust God on the way through.
Yeah.
And, I would like to sit here today and, tell you I just wrote a book and it's got all these wonderful points.
Yeah.
But it's trusting God on a day-to-day basis, keeping your head right, keeping your heart right, forgiving people when you need to forgive people, whether it's people that aren't agreeing or people that you're working with towards the transition. And this may not be what you're looking for, but it's about the head, it's about the heart, and the fact that life is just never easy.
Yeah.
And so we just keep trusting God.
We're in the people business. And I love Jesus.
Yeah.
It's just some of the people he hangs around with, right?
Yeah.
Well, in that transitional time that he's talking about, people leaving the church, I had a conversation with him where I had to sit down and just be honest and say, are you sure this is the choice that you want to make? I had to lean on him and the vision that he had at that time, because it was like, I'm watching all these people leaving the church after we've started making some of these changes, and it's like, was this the right choice? And he just walked me through it and said, yes, this is what we're going to do. You were called for this, and just built me back up in that and reassurance. And all right, we're going to move forward with this.
He's always been so great. Pastor Dar has been about edifying, in our giftings, but also like the culture that we wanted to develop, like we spent a lot of time developing cultures, like the underground, right? Like as there's transition, there's going to be a lot of cultivating. And so in that cultivation, Pastor Dar was just very supportive. It's your vision. What do you guys see? It's your vision. What do you want? And whatever you say, I'll support. And so that's just been
and
such a great
supporting it.
Yeah. And
not
actually,
just in word, but in deed.
Indeed, and work. And it's just been really, I don't know, it's probably been too easy.
Yes.
We're kind of at the end of our segment here, but I want to touch on just a couple of things if we could. Quickly talk about, Curt, if you could.
Quickly, okay.
How the government changed, because you're changing culture, okay? You're changing leadership style, okay? People are changing. There's transition happening. But what about, how did you transfer the governmental, what was that process like? Does that make sense?
It does, and I don't really see a whole lot that had changed, at least not quick enough to where I noticed it, I guess.
Yeah.
The structures and the people that he had in place, I was just having a conversation with another pastor about this, how blessed I was in that situation, that the people that he had selected, their hearts were so for the church and so on board with the vision that pastor had with the handoff, that they went with it, and they've been super supportive. Some of the largest supporters I have are the ones that he had in place. That's in that beautiful. Governance already. It made it so much easier for me to where I had their confidence first. That's the way that I feel that I had the confidence of my family, then I had the confidence of the governance, and at that point they gave me some security in myself of like, okay, I've got some backing here. And then through the leadership and through the years of us working through it, then the rest followed.
Yeah.
What was the biggest pain point that you walked through, Dar? What was the most painful moment that you had
do you want me to look away?
Process?
A couple of times, especially once when I wondered if the father-son relationship was going to make it.
Yeah.
And, that was a tough one, and that was where the Lord shouted even louder perspective and humility. And we did. We had one meeting that the volume got a little high.
Yeah.
And we rarely, through all the years, have had those.
Yeah.
But it was just, emotions got involved. And but we walked away from that. It was a quiet 7 or 10 days of not a lot of communications.
Yeah.
But then the Lord brought us back together, and And I think in the time, I don't know what happened on their end, but in my heart, there is a letting go, and I think that's probably, it was the toughest thing for me, and I think it's probably going to be the toughest thing for anybody that tries to do that.
You think that moment is one of the things that helped you come to the place to let go?
Well, I was already, so far in and committed. It was impossible. I was not going to go any other
Too
direction.
late to turn back.
But it was crossing the Rubicon. It was the point where this is you, God. I know you're in it.
Yeah.
I'm struggling, but laying it down.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Wow.
Curt, Taryn, what would you want to say to young leaders that are in your position to receive the baton in their life?
Stick with it.
Stay. I was going to say stay.
You have to make that choice based on the leading of God and not how you feel.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be a lot of frustrating seasons to where you feel like it's not worth it personally and you want to just walk away, because there's going to be a lot of easier options that are out there.
Yeah.
And so you always have to come back to, did God tell me this, yes or no? You have to make that choice right off the bat, and even write it down if you need to. Did God call me to do this?
Yeah.
Then if he's called you to do it, it is worth the struggles. It's worth the fights. There are so many times to where we're just at home talking about this. Like I can go do something else. I can get a job somewhere else, pay much better too. But it's just so many opportunities, and you have to make that choice before you go into it, that I'm going to stick through this to the end and see it through.
Yeah, I think when you're spiritually fed and you're drawing directly from the well, you're not going to be emotionally led in the process.
Yep.
I think emotions want to lead us astray. And so, sticking to it. And again, yes, if God called you to it, he's going to bring you through it. And it's going to be rough waters. It's going to be unknown territory, but it's so wonderful.
Yeah. And being incredibly conscious that this is a gift that's being given to you as far as the handoff of a ministry of any level. Yeah. This is a gift that you are receiving. Never treat it as your due.
Yes.
That would be the biggest thing. Is that I'm owed this. And that's one thing that we've communicated from the start. I was not owed that at any point. This was something that he had chosen to hand off to me. And so I wanted to honor that choice and just let him do it in his timing.
Yeah. Well, for someone that's watched from a distance, I just want to say I'm so amazed at how well you guys have done in this transition. And I know any transition's tough, and there's so many elements and fragments to it. I wish we could spend an hour, talking about even getting a little deeper, but we just have this moment. But I want to leave today just talking to you about, the scripture says, without a vision, the people perish. They cast off restraint. Yeah. One translation says they lose opportunities. And so what is God saying to you? What's the vision in your heart? And then you've got to be committed to that. And the vision is what gives you the empowerment to do what God's called you to do and go through any season, any difficulty. I think about that scripture that Pastor Dwayne's always quoting from the Translator's New Testament, Philippians chapter 2, verse 13. It says, "For God himself is at work in you, inspiring you to want those things that please him and to work for them." And so if there's any word of encouragement that we can give you out of this moment today, is that transition will come, seasons will change, and lay hold of the vision that God has for your life, whether it's a vision for a new season or it's for a vision of responsibility coming your way. You can do it as long as you honor God in the process. Hey, thank you so much for being with us today, and we want to thank you for being with us today on LINC Talks Podcast.